Welcome back. Let's do another lecture related to experimental studies and observational studies. Experimental bias, the placebo effect, and how we can combat them. We're going to start with experimental bias. Experimental bias is when we favor a certain outcome over others. Of course, we want to do this by using control variables or groups. And there is a famous example of this. Rosenthal and Fode experiment in 1963 actually had two groups of students, psychology students, assess the ability of rats to navigate a maze. One group was told that the rats were very bright. Another group just kind of assumed they were assigned dull rats. In reality, the rats were chosen randomly and there was no significant difference between them. However, the students who were told that their rats were bright, well, they started reporting faster running times than the student group that thought their rats had dull rats. In other words, the expectations of the students and the groups directly influenced the results. This was the first experiment showing the outcome or how an outcome of a study can be modified as a consequence of the interaction between the experimenter and the subjects. In other words, that is experimental bias. Let's take a look now at the placebo effect. The placebo effect is when many patients are confident that a treatment will positively affect them. So they react to it, and in reality, there is no physical effect at all. So why do we even use placebos? Well, in order to evaluate the difference between the placebo effect and the actual effect of the treatment, you have to use the placebo and the actual treatment along with controlling variables if you need them. However, I want to add though, the placebo is not a substitute for a control group. You still probably will need a control group. Now let's look at double-blind experiments. Double-blind experiments is a great way to actually avoid both the placebo effect and experimental bias. Double-blind experiments is when both your subject and your researcher are completely unaware of your subject's group status. They won't know whether their group is in a placebo group or not. So we avoid experimental bias by ensuring the researcher has no idea of what results may even be seen. So the earlier example, the student groups that knew what kind of rats they had, that will be avoided with a double-blind experiment. The placebo effect, also we can avoid this with double-blind experiments because the researcher cannot clue in their patients or their subjects into what kind of group they're in. That is how double-blind experiments can help in both of these situations.